Hello and welcome back, future scientists. I'm Mr. K with Mississippi Public Broadcasting, and we're going to start a new unit today. Okay, last time I saw y'all, we spent a lot of time talking about cellular respiration and photosynthesis. We're leaving all that behind, okay, and we're going to move into a special type of cell cycle known as meiosis, okay? And what we're really trying to make here is something called gametes, which I'm going to get into in a little bit of detail today. So thank y'all so much for making it. We'll go ahead and get the ball rolling on this and see what we have in store for the day. So here are our objectives when it comes to learning about meiosis. Okay, what we want to be able to do here, we want to be able to explain asexual reproduction. And this is going to include the genetic similarities between the parent and the offspring. Some other stuff we're going to talk about today is we're going to describe sexual reproduction and discuss how the genetic relationship between the parent and the offsprings differ from asexual reproduction. Okay, throughout this unit, we're also going to outline gametogenesis, okay, which is making gametes, and we're going to highlight the main differences in between oogenesis and spermatogenesis. Lastly, we're going to try to identify and explain the primary stages of meiosis, noting the differences in genetic materials between the original and the resulting cell. So these are 4 things that we're going to hit on as the unit progresses over the next 2 weeks, okay? Today, we're mostly talking about these 2 terms, okay? And we're really just introducing some language and some vocabulary words. But we're really going to harp on these 2 words, haploid versus diploid, okay? And we're going to talk about that in a lot of detail, and you'll kind of know what the difference is in between them by the end of today's lesson, okay? So let's go ahead and get into it. What is haploid? What is diploid? We're going to talk about body cells versus sex cells. Okay, so I want you to imagine all of the cells in your body, right? You've got cells that make up your skin and your brain and your muscles and your bones, okay? All of those would be body cells. Every cell in your body is a body cell. They are a little different than, there's one type of cell that's different, and those are sex cells. So these are cells that are used to reproduce. So for men, these are going to be sperm cells, and in women, they're going to be egg cells. So sperm and egg cells are just a little different than all the other cells in your body, okay? So body cells, this is everything that's not a sex cell. We would call this somatic. Somatic is a word for body. So the cells that make up your body, okay, all of these cells are called diploid. What does that mean? A diploid cell are cells that contain 2 sets of chromosomes and one comes from each parent. The way we would write this, there'll be a point where we kind of have to count the number of chromosomes and talk about how many chromosomes are in a cell. We're going to write that as 2n. And what that means is n is the number of chromosomes, and then because these are diploid, which means you have 1 chromosome from mom and 1 from dad, we're going to write it as 2n, which basically means you have a pair of chromosomes for every single one, okay? Let's compare that to sex cells. Another word for sex cells are called gametes. Again, sex cells in men, they're sperm, and in women, they're egg cells, okay? And another word for sex cells are called gametes, okay? Gametes or sex cells are said to be haploid, which means the cells that they only contain 1 set of each chromosome, meaning 1 chromosome from each pair, okay? And we're going to represent this as just a regular N. So what's going on here? Okay, well, your body cells, okay, so humans and every single one of our cells, we have 46 chromosomes. And people would say that we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, right? You have 23 pairs of chromosomes. For every pair, one of those chromosomes came from your mom and one of them came from your dad. So you kind of have like a backup for each one, okay? Those are your body cells. The sex cells don't really work that way, okay? Because when we're producing an offspring, the sperm and the egg come together to make a zygote, a new human. Well, if the sperm and the egg both had 46 chromosomes, when they came together, you'd have way too many, right? So these really need to be half the number that they normally are. And that means so the sperm is going to have 23 chromosomes, the egg is going to have 23 chromosomes. And when they come together, now we have the full 46 that we really need. So let me just tell you how I remember the difference in between these 2 words. This word haploid, H-A-P-L, it kind of sounds like the word half. So haploid, half, right? Well, to me, that makes it easy to remember that the sex cells and anything that's haploid, it has half the number of chromosomes that it really needs. And the reason it has half as much as it really needs is because when the sperm and the egg come together, we want to have a full set. We want to have 46. So each one has half, they have 23. And when they come together, that's how you get 46. Okay, the body cells are diploid, and that DI kind of makes me think of like a duplicate. And that means that for each chromosome, you have a backup. You have a duplicate. You have one from mom and one from dad. Okay, so you're going to hear me use a lot of these different words today, somatic and gamete, haploid, diploid. So I just wanted to make sure we kind of talked about that right off the bat. Okay, let's get into a little bit more detail in between the haploid and the diploid cell. Okay, and here are some examples. So I want you to imagine this for me, okay? So a fruit fly, the body cells, the somatic cells for fruit flies have 8 chromosomes. So how many are in the gametes of the fruit fly? Well, since the gametes have half the number of chromosomes as body cells, the fruit fly's gametes would contain 4 chromosomes. So when the male and the female get together, they each contribute 4 chromosomes from each, right? And when they come together, we have 8. And so now that fruit fly has the 8 chromosomes that it needs. Okay, so in this situation, we would say that the body cells with the 8 chromosomes, this is diploid, and we would say that the gametes having half, right, is haploid. And again, half and haploid kind of sound alike to me, so that's how I remember the difference in between them. So let's keep it going. The next one here says, if an organism has a haploid number of 18, what is the diploid number? So again, remember, haploid is like half the total, right? So what is the diploid number? Well, how would we get there? We're just going to take 18 and multiply it by 2. So the next bullet point kind of describes it. The diploid number is twice the haploid number. So for an organism with a haploid number of 18, the diploid number would be 36. 18 and 18 come together to make 36. So what this means is that whatever organism this is, let's just say it's like a dog, inside the dog's sex cells are 18. There's 18 in the sperm and 18 in the egg. But when the sperm and the egg come together to make a zygote, which is like a new organism, that zygote now has 36 because it got half from its mom and half from its dad. Okay, here's the last one. So this says N equals 24. Is this the haploid or the diploid? Is this the number of chromosomes in the gamete or the body cell? Well, if N equals 24, this refers to the haploid number. Remember that haploid is just written as a regular N with no extra number in front of it. So this refers to the haploid number. This is the number of chromosomes found in the gamete, which would be the sperm or the egg cells. If this number represents whatever organism this is, what would be the diploid of it? Well, you would just multiply it by 2. Right, so that would be, the diploid number here would be 48, because 24 and 24 make 48. So I hope you were kind of getting the difference in between haploid and diploid a little bit. Okay, I'm going to kind of leave that for a second and talk about asexual reproduction. I talked about this way at the beginning of the year, but it's been a while, so I kind of want to refresh your memory. What is asexual reproduction? Well, it's reproduction that happens without sex, okay? And a lot of like single-celled organisms do this. Okay, so asexual reproduction, in asexual reproduction, you only have one parent, okay? The offspring are going to be genetically identical to the parent. This does not involve meiosis. So what we're going to talk about over the next couple weeks is meiosis. If a organism reproduces asexually, it would not do meiosis. And common modes of reproduction are binary fission, that's what bacteria do, budding, which is like what a hydra does, and then spore formation. And over here I have a picture of a hydra budding, and this is an example of asexual reproduction. When hydras bud, what they do is you can see, in number 1, it's just a hydra. There's nothing special going on here. But then in 2, the bud starts to form. You see this little, you see this little thing coming out of it? That's a bud. Okay, well, as the picture progresses, it's going to get bigger and bigger, and then eventually it's just going to snap off. And now here in picture 5, we have 2 hydras, and then the last one we have 2 hydras that are about the same size. This is an example of asexual reproduction. When this happens, you only use one parent, right? We only have one parent here, and these 2 are going to be genetically identical. They're going to be the same, almost like they're twins, but they obviously weren't made at the same time, okay? This has some benefits and some drawbacks, which we'll talk about at a later point, okay? So let's compare that to sexual reproduction. Okay, sexual reproduction, this is what most animals do. Not all animals, but most animals do sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves 2 parents, okay? What happens here is that the offspring are not going to be genetically identical to the parents. It's kind of a mix of both of them because the mother, one of the parents is going to contribute half of its genetic material and the other parent is going to contribute half of its material. Those genetic material comes together. It's kind of like taking a deck of cards and shuffling it. It's not going to be exactly the same. You're kind of working with the same building blocks, but the exact order of the cards are not going to be the same anymore. And this occurs through meiosis. So what we're talking about here over the next couple of weeks is all going to be revolved around meiosis, and this is what has to happen in order to reproduce sexually. Okay, so let's talk about sexual reproduction and gametes. Okay, sexual reproduction and gametes. So there's 2 different cells are going to combine to create a new organism. Okay, gametes, which are called sex cells, those are our reproductive cells. They have half the number of chromosomes found in body cells. Again, that's called being haploid. Okay, there's 2 types of gametes. In men or males, we have the sperm. Okay, and in females, we have the egg. And another name for egg is the ova. That root word there, OV, just means egg. So anytime you see O or OO, it's probably talking about an egg. Okay, so these 2 gametes, the sperm and the egg, they're going to come together. When they come together, that fusion is called fertilization. Okay, what happens now is we take half of the chromosomes from the sperm, half of the chromosomes from the egg, and we put them together, okay? Now we have a new organism. It's just 1 cell large, but we call that a zygote. This is the first thing you are when you're in the mother's womb. You're a zygote. That's when the mother and the father's genetic material first come together. Okay, the number of chromosomes in each gamete is referred to as the haploid number. So remember, when we say haploid, that only is talking about gametes or sex cells, and we write that as just N representing whatever number of chromosomes you're supposed to have. Okay, then the number of chromosomes in each body cell is called the diploid number, which is 2N, because now we have twice as many that are in the gametes. Okay, so for example, sperm and egg cells only have 23 each, but the diploid number would be 46 because now we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay, great work. So let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. Let's kind of get into the nitty-gritty here. So gametogenesis, this word genesis, that suffix means formation of. So we're forming gametes, and there's 2 types of gametes we can form. We can either make sperm cells, which is called spermatogenesis, or we can make egg cells, which is called oogenesis. And again, the double O there is telling us that it's making eggs. Okay, these processes are not really that similar, okay, because in spermatogenesis makes 4 haploid sperm cells. So when meiosis happens, you start with 1 cell, it splits, and it's going to form 4 sperm cells. That's not what happens with the egg cells. When we're making eggs, it's a little different. We take that mother cell that we start with, and then through this process, oogenesis, we actually only get 1 mature ovum or 1 mature egg cell, and we're going to have 3 what are called polar bodies. So what happens is the egg cell is much larger than the sperm cells, And because of that, we kind of have to contribute more to one egg cell. So we get one large egg cell and then these three things called polar bodies, which we don't use. And then through spermatogenesis, we make 4 sperm cells. So they're a little different. Spermatogenesis makes 4 and oogenesis makes 1, okay? Great. Let's keep it going. So let's talk about those chromosome numbers a little bit more. Okay, so the number of different types of chromosomes in an organism is referred to as its haploid number. So remember that the egg and the sperm cells are haploid. Okay, chromosome numbers when it comes to body cells, remember that another word for body cells are called somatic cells, and we would write that as 2N. And if you see 2N, that's telling you that it's a diploid. That's the diploid number, and that these are coming from body cells. Okay, gametes have a number of chromosomes that are haploid. So for humans, for example, the haploid number at the bottom, N equals 23, and so that would be 23 chromosomes in an egg or a sperm cell. When they come together and make a zygote, now we're at 2N, which equals 46, and that's how much you're supposed to have, 23 pairs. One coming from mom, one coming from dad for each chromosome, and so that would give you 46 chromosomes total, okay? Great job. Okay, a couple more vocabulary words I wanted to talk about before we get into meiosis. Okay, so one vocabulary term that we really need to know is called homologous chromosomes. Okay, this prefix, homo, means the same. And so what's going on here is that through this process, when the cell is doing meiosis, we're going to form something called homologous chromosomes. Homologous chromosomes are chromosomes, one is coming from mom and one is coming from dad. So homologous chromosomes, these are pairs of chromosomes that are similar in shape, size, and type of genes on each chromosome. Each locus, a locus is a location of a gene, is the same position on each chromosome of the pair. Humans have 23 pairs of homologous chromosomes. Okay, so if you look at this picture over here, I'll talk about this picture in just a second, what it is and what it represents. Okay, so humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Each pair of chromosomes kind of are very, very similar, and those are called homologous chromosomes. So this is a special picture. It's called a karyotype, and what it represents is all the chromosomes inside of our bodies. And you can see here, so this would be the first homologous chromosome, or the first pair of chromosomes. You'll see that they are similar in size, and they would also have the same type of information on them. Now, as you go further down these chromosomes, you'll see that they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so this is one set of homologous chromosomes, but we could also come down here and these two little lines represent a different pair of homologous chromosomes. What makes them homologous? Well, these two are about the same in size and these two are about the same in size. Not only are they similar in size, but they would also have the same type of information. So these chromosomes might have the type of information that determines what color your hair is, and these chromosomes might have information that determines what color your eyes are, right? And just depending on which one is more dominant is what we would kind of see. So here we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and we call those homologous chromosomes. Okay, let's talk about this picture as a whole real quick. I know I kind of just talked about it, but I wanted to give you the name of it. What we're looking at here is a karyotype. Okay, a karyotype is an image that displays the organism's chromosomes. So here are all the chromosomes in a human. Okay, the karyotype of a normal human male shows all 23 pairs of chromosomes. So this is a karyotype. When we make karyotypes, we use the chromosome pairs and we just put them from largest to smallest. So this isn't necessarily how they're arranged in your body or anything. When we take this picture, we just arrange them from biggest to smallest. And then the last set of chromosomes is the sex chromosomes. And this determines if you're male or female. I know that this is a male. We'll talk about how I know that later on. Basically, because you have one kind of longer chromosome and then one little tiny chromosome, I know that this is a male. So we got 22 body chromosomes, and then we've got the sex chromosomes there at the end, and this whole image is known as a karyotype. Okay, we'll look at karyotypes in more detail later on. So let's talk about homologous chromosomes again. Remember that homologous chromosomes are chromosomes that are similar in size and have the same type of information. When we're doing this process known as meiosis, something really special happens between these homologous chromosomes, and it's called crossing over. Okay, so let's look at our first picture here. Okay, so the red is a chromosome, and it's saying that we got it from our mom, and then the blue is a chromosome, and we got that from our dad. Okay, well, when these homologous chromosomes come together, they're going to do something called crossing over, which means they exchange information and they mix it up. It's like shuffling that deck of cards that I was talking about earlier. So this is what we're starting with, all red over here, all blue over here, okay? But then after that, this crossing over happens, look what we're left with. We still have two homologous chromosomes, but the information's kind of shuffled up. This first one is like half blue, half red, and then just a little blue up here, and then half red, half blue. What this does, this process of crossing over, when we're shuffling up this genetic material, you'll see kind of later on, this increases genetic diversity. If you have siblings, unless it's a twin brother or sister, your information both came from your parents, right? Your information, your genetic information came from your parents. Your siblings' genetic information came from your parents. Well, why don't y'all look exactly alike? If y'all both are pulling from the same pool, why don't y'all look exactly alike? It's because of this process called crossing over. It shuffles all the information up. You might have your mom's hair and your mom's eyes, but your sister might have your dad's hair and your dad's eyes. And that's because we shuffled the information up here. I know that's kind of confusing, but it'll make more sense later on. Just remember that this process is called crossing over, and it happens between homologous chromosomes. Okay? Y'all hang in there with me. We're rolling through this really, really well. Okay, so let's talk about the difference in gamete formation between men and women. Okay, so as a reminder, in men, we do something called spermatogenesis, and we're going to make sperm cells. When we do this, we produce 4 functioning sperm cells, and all of them can be used to make offspring. In females, it's a little bit different. Females, instead of sperm cells, they're making something called egg cells. And this process is called oogenesis, okay? Well, it's a little different. In oogenesis, instead of 4 functioning egg cells, we get 1 functioning egg cell and 3 polar bodies that cannot be used. So that's the main difference in between gamete formation between men and women, okay? Y'all, thank you so much for hanging in there with me. This stuff is complicated, but we're going to get into plenty more detail as the unit goes on. Your teacher has some other assignments for you to work on, so make sure to give that your best effort, and I hope everybody has a great day.